Hello and welcome to this occasional series of videos about software development in C#. On this slide here, I just want to discuss what I'm going to go through in this fairly short video. I want to talk about the structure of a C# program. I want to talk about using statements, the main method of execution, the use of comments, methods themselves, and parameters. And with this information, you should be good to go to start writing your own C# code, and more importantly, understanding it. So let's have a look at the code that is under review. This is called a linear search version 1, and it performs a linear search on an array of numbers. The array is here, and it picks out the position of a matching value. I'll explain a bit more about that shortly. Now, the first thing I wanted to talk about was the use of using statements. So let's have a look at that. I've got one using statement here. These statements call other libraries, or technically namespaces, that are important for the execution of your code. Using system is the most important one for C#. There are other ones like using maths, etc., and you will work out which ones that you need to use as you go along. But the first thing that you do in your program is declare your using statements. The next thing here is the namespace, and that is the name given to a group of pieces of code that all do similar things or are all related to one another. Okay, this one just has namespace linear search. Let's talk about the main method of execution. Okay, before I come to that, I just want to say that here, if I just compress that, the rest of the code in this program is a class called program. And if I sort of reveal that, we see all the code. Notice the curly braces here, how they all match one another. So this one, the opening curly brace, has a match there, and there. And all of these different curly braces can be looked at. And here on the left hand side, I don't know what we call this, but there is this way of hiding different bits of code to make things look more simple. So there we have class program, and it's shown in a much more simple way. Now, I wanted to talk to you about the main method. Every program in C# will have a main method, and Microsoft will write the basic code for you here, which is static void main open the bracket with string, two of these square brackets here, and then args, which means arguments. So every C# program must have this, and you can think of whatever you write in this area here as the center of the action. Now, you might send off from here to other classes and things like that and do other things, and some of those classes may not even be in this piece of code, but this is the center of the action, the main method. So if you haven't written anything here in the main method, even if you've written other classes to work with this program or other methods, I'm afraid nothing is going to happen. So use the main method as the launch pad for everything else that you want to do. And by the way, some simple programs will just take place here in the main method, and you may not need anything else at all. So, comments. So everything that you see here in green, which begins with this double // is a comment. Comments are for us, the human beings. When this code is compiled and then run on the processor, the comments will be long gone. So this and everything else that you see in green is purely for us to look at here in what we call the source code. So they're stripped out at the next stage, which is to send it to the C# compiler. Now, why do we use comments? We use comments to bring understanding to the code that we are writing. And that's what I've done here. So I've said here, this is the start of my code. I've said that here, after this comment in the line below, we're creating a string array called data that contains a series of numbers. So I'm talking about that line there. Comments can follow on afterwards, like that. But generally, my practice is to put the comments above, and a lot of other coders do that too, because it reads better and it gives you more room. Methods. I talked here about the main method of execution of the code, but we don't have to restrict ourselves in a particular class just to the main method. We actually have the ability to write extra methods, and I've written one here called int array linear search. Notice, by the way, the use of capitalization there, camel case, okay, for the letter that starts each word. So integer array linear search. So I've tried to make that descriptive of what it does. The method itself is hiding here, so I just reveal it there. It's about 20 lines of code, okay, and it does something specific. And what it does is that it searches an array to find a matching number and report back on the position of that number. You can write other methods according to whatever you need. If you make it public, other code can see it, so that's useful. And if you call it here, I've put int because that indicates the type of return value that the code is expecting. Parameters. Methods usually have parameters, and the parameters for this method here, int array linear search, are these. They follow in the brackets after the declaration of the name. And what I have here is int bracket bracket array input. That means that when I call this method, int array linear search, when I call it in code, the first thing that we're going to put into it is an array of integers. And then the bracket here denotes another parameter to put in, and this time it is a single integer, which I've called here item to search for. And then here, the final parameter, so it's 3 parameters, is an integer called start item. And the names I use here are the names that I use in the code that follows. So that's important. So you say, okay, big deal, Paul, you've created a method there, but what do I actually do with it? Well, let me just hide it there. Let me show you, like I said earlier, the main method of execution is where all the action happens. So if I want to call this method here, int array linear search, there must be some code here in this main method that actually shows me and calls this particular method. And we do call it. We call it here in line 24, and we call it as part of a console write line where we write to the console display. So when I write here interlinear search and then put these values in, parameters, in these brackets, I'm calling this method here, and I'm putting data into it as parameters here for the method to use. So by calling it here in this right line, I'm making this method work with these values, and it's going to return a value as well. And it is the return value, which happens to be called found, that this method is actually going to write here on this line. So that concludes the explanation of a structure of a piece of C# code. I haven't talked a great deal about what this particular code does, but I have tried to show you that there is a structure, that there's a main method of code execution, and then we can also have subsequent methods to do different things, all within a single class. And this single class is also part of a namespace and is at the moment the only part of this namespace. So thank you for watching, and look out for other videos on software development in C#.